Thank you, Alan. I appreciate you welcoming everybody to the space tonight. And I would also like to extend my own welcome. So as Alan said, my name is Scott Malloy. I'm a senior career advisor at the RISD Career Center. And as Alan mentioned, you are here tonight to learn about networking and building professional relationships. And we're going to cover a lot of ground, hopefully in a short amount of time. But one of the things I just want to say before I sort of pull up some visuals and showcase some information on slides for you is to just acknowledge that I think for a lot of people, networking is one of those things that has this negative connotation, not for everybody, but a lot of people kind of come into it feeling weary of it or being afraid of it or not really understanding how it can be a powerful tool in their own career paths and career development. And I totally get that. I totally understand why people have that kind of apprehension. And my goal tonight is that hopefully, by the time we're done this evening, you feel a little bit more comfortable with it. You understand how networking can be valuable for you, how you can kind of develop your own personal style of networking, right? There's no one right way to network. I have some tips and advice and strategies for sure. But you can tailor it and make it authentic to you. And like I said, hopefully you kind of see the value in it. You can make it your own and you feel better about networking at the end of this conversation, at the end of this presentation. So that's the goal. So I kind of gave a preview of this earlier, but these are the main areas we're going to cover tonight. So first is essentially the value of networking or why this is something you even need to do or should consider doing at all, right? Like if you're here, you probably have like some kind of instinct or inclination that this is maybe something you should do, but we'll talk about why it has value. We'll also go over some of the key resources that can help you become better at networking, help you find professionals and people that you can add to your network and that are going to be valuable collaborators and mentors and just people that you're going to want in your professional sphere. So we'll kind of give you some tools that'll help with that, or point you towards some tools that'll help with that. And lastly, and I think especially for students or people who are newer to the concept of networking or just newer to professional realms in general, one of the anxieties about networking can be like, okay, well, what do I say? Like when I reach out to people that I want to connect with, how do I even do that? What's the etiquette and what's the right way to go about that? And so we'll end with a conversation about how you can approach that part of it. So let's start with the value of networking. Why should you do this? One thing I want to highlight really quick is everyone in this audience is a member of the RISD community in some way, right? Either you're a student or an alum, or maybe you're in the CE program or some other version of being connected to RISD. And what I'm showing you on the screen right now is just a preview of some of the amazing and really noteworthy RISD alumni that have kind of come before you, most likely. People like Nicole Miller, who has started a really well-regarded lifestyle and fashion brand, an amazing artist like Carol Walker, who's an incredible painter, printmaker, installation artist, one of RISD's 10, I believe, MacArthur Genius Fellows, so just an incredible, astounding artist. Somebody like Dale Chihuly, who is, in some ways one of the preeminent artists in the glass field and went to RISD to study ceramics. And is just like a titan, so to speak, in the realm of art glass. And then another artist like Jenny Holzer, who's a little bit more of a conceptual artist, but does amazing things with language and words in public spaces and getting people to really kind of think about abstract concepts in new and challenging ways. And we have people like Marley Gallardo, who's a more recent graduate, but an amazing editorial illustrator who's worked with clients like Apple and Netflix and the New York Times. Actually going to reference Marley's Instagram a little bit later. She's a fun follow if you're on Instagram, somebody who uses Instagram really well. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but just an amazing person. I think actually a faculty member at RISD now too, and an amazing illustrator. Somebody like Joe Gebbia, who a lot of people may know is co-founder of Airbnb, and also a RISD grad, a RISD alum, and one of the most successful kind of entrepreneurs that you'll find in the tech world. Another entrepreneur like Yalitza Jean Charles, graduated in 2015 from illustration, has an amazing company called Healthy Roots Dolls that's really doing amazing things, creating dolls and toys for children of color so that they can feel represented in the toys that they're buying. She was recently featured over the holidays. Her products were featured in Target in their like top holiday toys for kids. So her company has just exploded since RISD, and she's doing amazing things. And it's just an incredible person to kind of follow and see what she's up to. And then a lot of people know Shepard Fairey, sort of a preeminent person in the kind of street art world and activist art world, another RISD alum. Just again, sort of like an artist who's found a way to have a significant voice and make a significant impact with the work that they're making. The reason why I'm highlighting some of these artists and alums and designers and creators is because it's always fun to kind of just learn about what RISD alumni are up to and see the amazing ways that RISD alums are, creating and making impact in the world. But beyond that, I want to also illustrate the point by highlighting some of these people that, again, everybody who's here tonight is part of the RISD community in some way. And so are these individuals. They may be, famous or well-known in some cases, but they're also, RISD alums and a part of the RISD community. And in a sense, already a part of a network that you kind of share with them because you've gone to the same school, you've gone through the same experiences, and in some cases might even be working similar industries or areas. And that's a really amazing thing. And I think sometimes when you're in school or you're a recent alum, it's easy to lose track of those kinds of things and not see those kinds of connections that you have. But these are individuals that, potentially could be in your network. And that's just a really powerful reminder, I think. So departing from that kind of moment of inspiration, I mentioned that I wanted to talk about why is this networking thing something you should even do, right? Why is this something we should even care about? And there are lots of potential answers to this question, but I do think this stat that I'm about to share with you is one really big reason why. So if we ask the question, what is the percentage of jobs that are found through or via networking and referrals? So this question kind of gets at like, how are people finding jobs? What's the percentage of people who are finding jobs from networking and referrals? What might that percentage be? And this is a bit of a rhetorical question. You don't have to respond in the Q&A or in the chat or anything like that. But I want to kind of go through this to kind of just show you what that number looks like. So it's not 25%. It's not even half. It's not even 50%. According to this survey, it's 85%. So the source for this number is an Adler group, which is like a research group that studies jobs and employment. They did a survey of 3,000 people, and they asked them, how did you find your most recent position? And 85% of those people that were surveyed said it was through some form of networking or referral, as opposed to what I think a lot of people think of as a job search, which is like, I'm going to go online and I'm going to find a position, I'm going to apply to it. It's not that that doesn't work, right? Like that is a viable way to find work. I'm not saying like you should never apply to jobs online or anything like that. That's definitely something that you should do. But I think a lot of people only do that, or they only think of that as job searching, when in reality, statistics like this show us that having a real and profound and robust professional network that is kind of aligned with our goals and values is really going to have tangible impact on our ability to find opportunities in the professional realms and arenas that we're interested in. So in like one number, I feel like this does a really good job of illustrating why networking is kind of worth your time and why it's something that you should invest in. Again, whether you're a student, an alum, or anywhere in between. Beyond that factor of just, it being an important part of a job search or an important part of the way you might find professional opportunities, I also think there's an even, a less tangible, let's say, or a less concrete value, but still meaningful value to networking. And that's the fact that if you have a really strong network, it can become almost like a support group of kind of like-minded professionals, or people who have, again, like similar interests, similar jobs, similar skill sets. Basically people who in some ways are sort of passionate about similar things to you and engaged in the same kind of activities as you. It can become that group for you, and that group can have lots of value throughout your career. And so I think to maybe crystallize it a little bit, there's kind of like two main ways where having a network and having connections that that are related to your interests and related to your profession can be really impactful for you. And I think they can give you, in a sense, they can give you an advantage in kind of two main areas. So one of those areas is an advantage in relevant knowledge. So what I mean by that is the more people that you are talking with that have like roles and expertise and knowledge in the industry that you're pursuing, the more likely it is that they're going to be able to share what they know with you. And therefore, you're then equipped with that knowledge that you otherwise might not have known if you didn't have a network or you weren't actively using your network, right? So you can kind of think about it almost as like, if you're talking with people and those people have an expertise that is relevant to what you're trying to do, you're actually able to kind of learn vicariously through them, right? They're able to share information with you that you might not have been able to get otherwise. So that's that access to knowledge piece is an important part of networking. The other way to kind of think about it, or the other way it can be useful, is giving you an advantage in access to opportunity. So that's kind of what we were talking about before with that 85% stat, which is the reality that sometimes positions, opportunities, freelance gigs, etc., those aren't always posted online. Those aren't always something that you can find on a job board. Sometimes those opportunities are more word of mouth. Sometimes that's something that people say to their network, like, hey, I'm looking, we have this opening and I'm looking for somebody with skills X, Y, Z. Do you know anybody who fits that profile? And then if you have a network where you're tied in, you might get notified about that opportunity that maybe wasn't posted anywhere, right? It might not have been posted on a job board, or maybe it was just on that company's website, but they didn't post it externally. So unless you were looking on that website, you wouldn't know, or unless you were tied into somebody at that company or had a network connection there, right? Like, that's where this access to opportunity piece comes in. So I think thinking about it in terms of like having a network and activating your network can help you learn lots of really valuable information that's going to impact your career, and also give you access to opportunities that you otherwise might not have. We start to see how these things can converge and make a real case for why a network can be an important thing. I also want to emphasize the idea of networking really being or equaling kind of learning and sharing. And again, this kind of goes back to the idea I was saying earlier, like I think people sometimes have a negative connotation of like what networking is. It feels like icky, or it feels like you're just using people. And I really don't see it that way. There are people who network like that, like that's a real thing. But I think if you're doing networking right, it's really more about like establishing authentic, real connections with people who align with your values, and also like you learning from them and also them learning from you, and you sharing mutually beneficial information. I mean, that's really what it is at its core. And just to kind of illustrate that point a little bit, because I know there might be people across the art and design spectrum in the audience, people who consider themselves designers, people who consider themselves fine artists, people who blur the lines between those two. And I believe that networking is valuable for everybody across that spectrum. It might look a little different, but it's still a valuable activity regardless. What I'm showing on the screen right now is going to maybe kind of like put a stark line between design and fine art, and it doesn't have to be that stark. And as we know, it isn't always that different, or the lines might blur. But I did want to kind of show you how, if you're in the design world, questions you might be asking in networking conversations versus if you're in the fine art world, just to kind of show the value to each. So for a designer who's looking to maybe work at a design studio or a design firm or something like that, connecting with people at companies and studios you're interested in and asking them questions like, what types of projects do designers work on in your studio? So just learning more about the type of work that they do. What skills are most valuable for designers to have at your company? So what skill sets do you usually look for, or what skill sets are common with team members that you work as part of the team you work on? Do you have any tips for creating a portfolio that would be best fit for X industry? So maybe it's like user experience design, maybe it's landscape architecture and urban planning. It could fill in any blank really there. But if you're asking somebody who's working in that industry, they might be able to give you some really valuable portfolio tips that are specific to that industry. And I like this one, especially if it's somebody who's maybe seasoned a bit. They've maybe been working 5+ years, post graduation, asking something like, hey, what do you wish you knew starting out when you were starting out as a designer, when you were emerging, from school? So I think that's a nice one, because it's kind of open-ended, but it can give you really good advice from that person's perspective on like, oh, when I was graduating, I wish I had done this. And that can help you prepare for the future better, especially if you're still a student now. On the flip side, and again, I'm making a stark contrast between design and fine art, which doesn't always exist, but just to kind of illustrate the point, if you're more of a fine artist who's envisioning more of a kind of like studio practice and kind of fine art career path, maybe you would talk to a gallerist or somebody who works in a gallery and museum and ask them like, hey, what do you look for when you're looking into artists who you might show in your gallery, include in an exhibition, or that you might represent if their gallery does representation of artists? What are the qualities or abilities that you look for? Like, what are some patterns that you've seen emerging in that? Maybe it's speaking with somebody who is a part of a granting organization, like a New York Foundation for the Arts, or Rhode Island State Council for the Arts, or Creative Capital, some of these organizations that help fund and support artists. You could talk to somebody and ask them, hey, what, in your experience, when you've looked at grant and residency applications, what are the patterns that emerge for people who do well? What things do you suggest? If that's something I'm going to be doing as an artist, what advice can you give me that's going to be helpful so that I can be better at that process? Just maybe more general, like what if, kind of similar to the question we had for the designer, like what advice do you have for an emerging artist like me? What are things I should be doing? What are resources I should be accessing? Do you have any tips for setting up a studio? All the kinds of practical advice and knowledge that is really, really useful as you're building your career. And again, it's like, it's amazing if you can kind of access that knowledge vicariously from people who have experienced it a little bit. So I think these are the types of questions these aren't the only ones for sure. And again, like you can be blurring the lines between these two areas. It doesn't have to be on one or the other. But I think this gives you a sense of like how you can start to see how networking can really help you learn some really valuable things. I think this is a big takeaway for tonight. And that's the idea of when you think about networking, I think one of the things that becomes daunting for people sometimes is not really knowing where to start. So like, okay, I kind of get why networking is important, but I don't really know where to begin. Like, what do I do first? And I think that one of the answers to that question is this idea of like developing a networking plan or a networking strategy. So one thing I would say is a network is something that takes time to cultivate. It's not something where you snap your fingers and, okay, I didn't have a network yesterday and now I have a network. Like it's something that is constant and evolving. It's a process that will, go with you and be something that grows with you for your entire career. One thing I will say is that even if like you're a young student in the audience right now, you actually do have a network right now. It's the people around you, it's your classmates and schoolmates, like they're a part of your network already and they're going to be down the line too. So you actually, without even doing any work, you kind of have a network, which is cool. Also, faculty members are a part of your network as another example if you're a current student. So that is nice. And family and friends, also a part of your network. So everyone kind of has a little bit of an inherent built-in network to a certain extent. But my encouragement would be go beyond that. Don't be limited to just what is there in front of you. It's good to utilize the community and network that's there right there as part of your school and whatnot, but go beyond that. And so what this plan is kind of illustrating is how you can do that. So I think a good starting point for everybody is start to make a list for yourself. And it's kind of what you're seeing on the right-hand side here. It could be a spreadsheet, doesn't have to be, but a spreadsheet might work well. Maintain a list of your favorite design studios, your favorite artists, art organizations or creative organizations, anything in the professional world, right? So this is, again, this runs a spectrum. It's going to look a little different for everybody, but start to maintain a list of places where you see their work and you're like, that's awesome. Like I connect with that. That might be a place I want to work one day or somebody I want to collaborate one day with, or maybe if it's an artist, somebody I could imagine kind of emulating my practice after. So start to build a list for yourself. And so you're seeing on the right, this is somebody, just in this example, somebody who's maybe kind of interested in technology. So they've got like places like Google Creative Lab, Microsoft, Capital One Labs, Virgin Pulse. And then they're kind of organizing it where they're saying like, okay, that's the industry that this company is in. And then what they've started to do is over time, they've set aside time maybe each month or so, periodically. Doesn't have to be like a daily thing, but over time, they have set aside time to research those organizations and specifically to find networking connections that are working at that organization or are somehow affiliated with that organization. So that's what you're seeing in that third column. That networking connections column is helping them to kind of start to develop a list of people that they may want to reach out and kind of add to their network. And then in the last column there, they kind of just have notes to themselves about like, how did I meet this person? Maybe I met them at a RISD Career Center event, for example. Maybe if I haven't met them, I have a plan to reach out and I'm going to do that. Maybe I've sent them an email and I need to kind of like follow up on that, or maybe we've scheduled a call to have, a more in-depth conversation. So that last column just gives you a way to kind of track, your activity and kind of stay up to date on how you've been building your network and how these connections are growing for you and how they're evolving over time. You start with a list and make it small and manageable and build upon it. But what I would say is always be looking to kind of like grow or evolve or look for new people, look for new relationships. So don't be afraid to kind of go beyond this list, add more people to it, and even ask individuals on the list that you've already had conversations with if they know of other people or could suggest other people that would be valuable for you to talk with. So sorry, I jumped ahead there for a second. So this kind, just to summarize, doesn't have to look exactly like this, but this kind of networking strategy where you give yourself sort of like a home base that you can return to and kind of track your professional relationships over time, I think it makes networking, it organizes it a bit, it gives you a way to track it, and it also makes it less daunting because it gives you kind of a place where you can come back and kind of monitor your progress and just see how things are going over time. So now I'm going to pivot into a portion of the talk where we really focus on how to find people. So I think if we kind of think about that last slide, what we were focusing on there is how you can kind of set up the structure. But the question that some of you might be having is like, yeah, that's great, but how do I find those people at those organizations, right? Like, how do I fill in that column? And I totally get that question. It makes sense 100% why you'd be asking that. So hopefully this section will help clear that up a little bit. So there are many, many ways to network, more ways than what you're seeing on the screen right now. I just want to be totally clear about that. I would never be able to cover like all the different ways you can network in any talk. We'd be here indefinitely until the end of time. But I do want to focus on a few key areas. And in particular, some resources for networking that are kind of tried and true, but also some things that are maybe kind of specific or relevant to RISD as well that you might be able to access. And then even things outside of RISD that don't actually require you to be a RISD person at all to access them, but are really, really Really, really helpful. So we're really going to talk about LinkedIn, which I know most people have heard of and maybe even have a presence on, but hopefully after tonight, you'll understand it a little bit better. RISD alumni groups, if you're unfamiliar with what those are, we'll talk about them and how they can be useful. Instagram, most people know what Instagram is, but I think it's a potent networking tool if used right, especially for the field of art and design. So we'll spend a little bit of time talking about that. And then concept of professional associations, which I think is maybe of this list, the thing that is maybe going to be most foreign or kind of a networking concept that maybe people in the audience haven't tapped into as much, but it actually has a ton of value. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is, simply put, the largest online professional networking platform in the world. So if you are trying to grow and build your network and connect with professionals and have a professional presence online, it's tough to beat LinkedIn. It just is massive and it's widely used and it's global. So just for kind of sheer volume, it's impressive. We're going to touch on a lot of things with LinkedIn, but at its core, one of the things it allows you to do, like I just said, is kind of create a professional profile and have an online professional identity that you can be sharing with the world and that is accessible to the world. It's really great as a tool to research and explore creative paths and create in various industries. I'll show you some of the ways you can do that. This is probably one of the areas where LinkedIn is like underrated, meaning it's really useful for this, but probably a lot of people don't use it as much in this way. And hopefully you can kind of tap into that tonight. And kind of along the same lines, it's a really potent tool for being able to network within companies and studios that you are interested in, right? That you might want to work at and that you could see yourself collaborating with in some way. So I did want to spend a little bit of time. I mentioned this is like the largest online professional network in the world, and it is. And you can kind of see from that graphic, which actually, this is a little dated at this point. So actually, my guess is that the numbers here are even larger than what you're seeing, but it's huge. It is 722 million LinkedIn members across the globe, across 200 countries. You can kind of see the breakdown of where the members are located there. So what's awesome about this is it's global. And regardless of where you are based, where you live, where you work, where you may want to live and work, whether you're, at RISD, and you're from the US originally, or you are an F1 student who's here studying from another country, like the chances are that LinkedIn is going to have value for you wherever you're located and wherever you may find yourself. So it's a truly global platform, and there's not too many things out there that can say that, but LinkedIn really truly can say that. Companies have a major presence on LinkedIn. So there are over 50 million companies that use LinkedIn and have a company page, which I will kind of demonstrate in a little bit. But again, just sheer volume of places that hire, a lot of them are on LinkedIn. This, I think, kind of alludes to one of the bullet points from the last slide, which is that it's amazingly helpful. And members, have stated as much, as you can see, where 75 or 74% of people surveyed said that LinkedIn helped them in researching people and researching companies. So like I said, there's a high level of value for LinkedIn there. And then this number is also pretty crazy. So 94% of recruiters, hiring managers, talent acquisition professionals, people, in other words, people who hire, people who are involved in the hiring process, 94% of those people who have that role are active on LinkedIn. And that's kind of like a good alarm bell, right? That kind of points you to like, oh, this is maybe a place where I should have a presence because people who hire are there. And so it makes it easy to connect the dots between me as somebody who may be looking for work, people who are seeking people to fill opportunities. There's a natural connection that can be made. I'm not going to do a deep dive into the profile. I do want to go over some basics though, for sure. So you can kind of have a sense of what a good profile contains. And as you can see, I'll kind of cite an example from a RISD alum who is doing lots of good things with their profile, and I think is a good example to look at. But at the same time, I also do want to say that if you want feedback on a profile and you really want to kind of do a deeper dive, that could be something that maybe you'd come to an appointment with one of our career advisors to discuss. So if you're a student or an alum, you can make an appointment with us and have a deeper conversation about your profile and LinkedIn in general. But really quickly, I will kind of highlight a few things. So if we're looking at the profile there on the right-hand side, your tagline and summary is really important. So really what we're talking about there for the case of Nick is the title, right? Character designer and illustrator. So on LinkedIn, you get to kind of choose what you call yourself and what you declare yourself. And like, as you're seeing with Nick here, it's okay to use multiple terms. You can kind of speak to multiple areas of focus, but you do want to think about, like, what do I consider myself? What kind of creative, what kind of artist, what kind of designer? Because people will see that quickly. It's right below their name. So it kind of helps them understand who you are and what you do, and you have control over what that says. You also control this summary statement that you're seeing here, which there's a lot of different ways you can handle this. But I think with the summary statement, the basic idea is that you give people a sense of your personality. You give people a sense of what it is you do professionally. As you're seeing here with Nick, they're even pointing to a few specific specialty areas. So again, kind of honing in on professional skill sets and abilities that you have, as well as contact information. So making it easy for people to potentially go to your website or contact you via email. But the idea here is basically that you're kind of summarizing your area of focus as a professional, or the areas of interest that you have as a emerging artist or designer. The featured work section is, I think, a huge asset for creative people that unfortunately I see sometimes in profiles that people don't utilize. So on LinkedIn, you actually have the ability to upload images, even upload kind of graphic links to your work. You're kind of seeing here that that's actually a link to Nick's portfolio, but also if you scroll to the side, you're seeing samples of Nick's work. So it's a great way for you to showcase. You don't have to put your full portfolio. Like, I'm not saying like upload 20 images on here, but you could upload, a handful of at least maybe 4 or 5 that you feel really good about. And that can be a nice way to introduce people to your work right on your LinkedIn profile. You also, just like you would have on your resume, you have an experience section. And so you're kind of seeing Nick here has got some freelance work. He worked as a production designer. He worked as a character designer for Spirit Walk Games. So like on a resume, you have your experience with descriptions for the work or projects that you were involved in. One of the things you're seeing on the screen too is that you can actually link to those projects you were involved in too, which again is nice. That's like added value that you don't always get on a resume. You can literally link people to the work that you did, or at least link them to the imagery that you were working on, in this case, like illustrations or designs. And that is a nice pairing, right? You can have the description of what you did along with the evidence of what you did. This is another really cool tool and feature on LinkedIn, and that's the recommendations feature. So what you're seeing here is that Nick actually has multiple recommendations from various professionals in the world of production, in the world of film, in the world of gaming. So in this case, like director of design at Netflix, and also an art lead at a gaming company. And what they're doing is talking about how great of an experience it was to work with Nick. And that's, especially for a freelancer, that's like really, really valuable. But it's incredibly valuable for anyone, because if I go to your profile and I don't know anything about you, but then I see that professionals that are maybe kind of related to the work that I'm doing are vouching for your work and talking about how pleasant it was to work with you, it's going to make me feel much, much more confident about wanting to collaborate or work with you or hire you. So those recommendations, you don't have to have a ton, but if you can get 1 or 2 of those added to your profile, that's an amazing start. The one thing with recommendations just to keep in mind, they do have to be on LinkedIn. Like, the person writing the recommendation does have to be on LinkedIn, and you have to be connected with them. So you can't like find somebody who's not on LinkedIn and ask them to add the recommendation to your profile. It doesn't work like that. Like they do have to be on LinkedIn because they're linked, as you can kind of see from the screenshot here. But if you've got a person that supervised you at an internship, or that you worked with in a past job, or maybe even a faculty member, if you like TA'd with a faculty or something like that, that could be, they could recommend you for that experience, and that would add tremendous value to your LinkedIn profile. And then last but not least, similar idea, you have a skills section on LinkedIn. And again, you can control what skills you add. You definitely want to think about the skills that you have, but also how those skills match up with the professional areas and jobs and internships and industries that you're looking at, right? So you want to try to make sure that like the skills that you have are represented, but also that you're kind of speaking to the types of jobs and opportunities that you're pursuing. So looking at job descriptions can be really helpful here, because you can kind of get clues to what types of skills they're looking for, and make sure if you have it, that it's represented on your profile. But the other thing within skills here, and you're kind of seeing it with the numbers next to the skills. So like illustration, 134, conceptual art, 61, animation, etc. Those are people, that's the number of people who have endorsed Nick for that skill, meaning they have worked with Nick, or maybe they taught Nick, or they took a class with him, and they are sort of saying like, yeah, Nick has this skill, they're really good at this. It's not quite a recommendation, but it's kind of along the same idea. So with LinkedIn, the way that the endorsements work, just as a heads up, if you endorse other people for their skills, that will prompt, like LinkedIn kind of like sends them a prompt to say like, hey, such and such endorsed you for this skill. Do you want to endorse them for any skills? And it'll actually kind of give you some options to select. So it's reciprocal, which is nice. If you endorse people, they're going to be more likely to endorse you. You're not forced to do it, but it kind of prompts them to do it. Pivoting away from the profile. So I know that was a whirlwind of profile information, but hopefully that gives you the basics. And again, like you can always talk to somebody for more advice. But pivoting away from the profile and looking at how do you actually activate LinkedIn? So it's one thing to have a good profile, excuse me, but if all you do is create a profile on LinkedIn and then just kind of sit back and say like, okay, I'm done with LinkedIn, it's not going to have a ton of value for you. That's good. It's good to have a profile, and maybe people will find you and reach out to you. That can happen. But you want to be proactive in the way that you use LinkedIn. LinkedIn is like most other things. You get out what you put into it, and so I think that's the way you want to think about most networking tools or resources, and LinkedIn is definitely included. So I want to show you some of the ways you can activate LinkedIn, and this is kind of getting into like, how do you find people and how do you explore companies and whatnot. So one of the really cool things about LinkedIn, and I'm just going to kind of show you this video, is you can actually go to a school page. So in this case, we're going to do RISD, and actually explore the alumni on that page. So this is the RISD school page. I can click on the alumni tab, and it's showing me all of this really cool information, and I can use it to kind of search by different parameters. So I can look by what did they study, and in this case, you can kind of see a sample of everything that's there, but I'm going to click on industrial and product design. Maybe I'm an ID major. And when I do that, it shows me the main or most popular companies that RISD ID majors are working at. And then if I actually scroll down, as you're seeing now, it's like showing me the individuals who are at those companies. It's showing me the individuals who are RISD alums from ID and giving me a preview of their profile. I can take it a step further and go by location and say, show me ID alums who are in the San Francisco Bay Area or any place, and go and scroll down and see just those individuals. So this RISD school page and the alumni tab in particular allows you to really sort of do some kind of nuanced searches. And if I'm curious and I want to click on somebody in particular, I can, like in this case with Sophia, I can click on their profile and learn more about their role. I could scroll down and see, where have they worked before they were at Smart Design, et cetera, et cetera. So this Explore Alumni feature, where you go on LinkedIn and you can literally just type in Rhode Island School of Design in the search feature, and then go to the RISD page, click on alumni, and play with that kind of graphic search criteria. It allows you to do some really cool things by exploring by location, exploring by major, even exploring by different companies that people are working at. So it's a really cool tool that I think doesn't always get utilized on LinkedIn as much as maybe it should. Oops, sorry. Another thing I want to show you on LinkedIn that has a lot of value is a RISD specific thing, and that's the RISD LinkedIn alumni group. And so if you are a student or an alum at RISD, you can join this group. And obviously you have to have a LinkedIn profile, but aside from that, like, you're eligible to join this group. And what's cool about this is it's the largest RISD alumni group on LinkedIn. It has over 10,000 members in it. I think it might be over 11,000 at this point. And that number represents roughly 1/3 of the entire living alumni base across the globe. So it's a good chunk of the RISD alumni base in one group, in one area. And there's a lot of different advantages to using this group, but you can use it to easily connect with people. You can use it to find opportunities. I'm going to kind of show you an example of that in a second. And just explore and get further connected to the RISD alumni community. So again, just kind of like using this video as a demo. So this is the group. Like I said, it's got over 10,000 members. And at any given time, there's alums who are posting, making comments, asking for advice, sharing opportunities. An example of this that you're seeing here is an alum, Kendra, who is actually teaching at Kansas State and is saying, like, hey, we've got this open position, love for a RISD person to join me and be a part of the faculty team here. And I can go to Kendra's profile and learn more about them, see, their own background, what experiences they have before teaching at Kansas State University. If they have their own studio, I can see what they did even while they were at RISD as a grad student, an MFA student in furniture design. Like, with just a few clicks, I'm getting so much good information. And of course, I have the opportunity to reach out and connect with them and sort of build my network, maybe talk to them and explore this opportunity. If I'm interested in teaching, maybe I'm a grad student at RISD and teaching is something that's on my radar, I've all of a sudden got somebody I can reach out and talk to about it because I'm a part of this group. So this group is a good way to stay connected with other alumni, to continue dialogue and conversations. The other thing I'll say about groups real quick, this group and other groups on LinkedIn, not even just the RISD alumni group, is by joining a group, everyone in that group instantaneously, as soon as you join that group, they become a part of your LinkedIn network, essentially. Basically what happens is much easier for me to connect with them on LinkedIn because we share this group. So joining relevant groups can be a really powerful tool on LinkedIn that can help activate it and make it more useful for you. So the RISD LinkedIn group is a great starting point, but there are all kinds of groups that are not always even connected to schools. They might be connected to industries as well. And so you can search groups on LinkedIn really easily and search by, if let's say I'm an illustrator, I can look for groups relevant to illustration. I can look for groups connected to art direction or publishing, publication design, editorial illustration, etc. So you can kind of play with keywords in your group searches and find groups that are relevant to your passions and interests and join those groups. And then you're automatically expanding your network of most likely kind of relevant professionals who are interested in the same things that you are. Oops, sorry, it keeps doing this. Let me back out here for a second. Sorry, bear with me, everybody. One of the last things I want to show you, and I think this is another really cool thing about LinkedIn, is the ability to network with studios. So the fact that LinkedIn has company pages for, like I said, 50 million plus companies makes it really easy for people to learn about companies, and especially, reach out and establish connections with individuals at those companies if they want to. So I'll show you again like a little demo here. And in this example, we're going to use a company like Gensler, so like a major architecture firm. So you can just hop on LinkedIn, search for the company. Most of the time, it'll auto-populate and show you that company, but you can also just go to a general search page and find them. And what I like to do, there's many ways you can use these pages. You can learn basic information about the company. You can even look at jobs that they have, but I want us to focus on this People tab. So if you go to this People tab, it shows you a preview of the 6,000, in this case, 6,000 plus employees at Gensler that are on LinkedIn. I can say I don't want to go through 6,000. I want to focus on just those who graduated from RISD, and now it's just showing me the 57 that are RISD alums. And again, similar to that other RISD page we were on, I can scroll down and actually see who those 57 are and potentially consider reaching out to them. In this case, maybe I'm interested in design strategy, so I click on Allison's profile because that's her title. I can learn about what their current role is, but also what did they do while they're at RISD, right? What kind of internships and things did they tackle during their time at RISD as a clue to what I might consider doing if I want to get involved at design strategy or I want to work in that type of position at Gensler. So I know I'm going through this stuff rather quickly, but hopefully this is giving you a sense of like, oh, LinkedIn can be like, yeah, the profile is important, but I can explore studios and companies on LinkedIn. I can connect with RISD alumni through the RISD group. I can, find and learn more information about where RISD alumni are working in like popular geographic locations by going to the RISD school page and exploring that alumni tab. So hopefully that is clearing up, I think, and making real some of the really tangible ways you can use LinkedIn to your advantage. I'm gonna close the book, and sorry, I'm kind of bouncing in and out here. The video is kind of throwing me off a little. I'm gonna close the book on LinkedIn for right now and pivot a little bit to talk about RISD alumni clubs or groups and the value that these can have to your career long term. So maybe you don't know that these things exist, first of all, so I just want to kind of take a little bit of time to kind of explain what these are. So the RISD Alumni Relations Office helps kind of create and support alumni groups that are usually based around one of two categories. Either they're regional groups, so based around like where alumni are living and working, or they're industry groups, so they're based around industries or areas that people are working in. So there's like 20 plus industry related groups that students and alumni can join, and there are 30 plus regional groups or geographic groups that students and alumni can join. So to kind of visualize this and make it a little bit more tangible for you, you can go, first of all, if you're curious to explore this more, you can go to the alumni.risd.edu website, and I think Alan's going to share a couple of links in the chat that will make this even easier to find. And you can explore these groups in more detail and see if there's ones that are relevant for you. I'm giving you a little preview on the left-hand side. You can see the US clubs. So usually the way this works is the clubs are in cities or metro areas where there's a significant RISD population. So to be totally transparent, there's not a club for every US city, or even international city in the world, but these do tend to be places where there's sort of collections of RISD alumni. So this is actually, just even seeing this list is kind of helpful because it kind of gives you a clue of where RISD alumni tend to end up. As I said, it's not just US based though. So we do, RISD does, the Alumni Relations Office does have international clubs as well. And you can see those represented here. And again, it's in places where there tends to be sort of high populations of RISD alumni living and working. I mentioned the the industry clubs as well. They're called affinity groups. So it's like meaning like the people in these clubs have an affinity for animation or for fashion or for film or you name it, right? But you're seeing on the screen here a preview of some of these clubs. And I think it's a really, really good thing to be aware of that these clubs exist. It's relatively new. This is probably maybe a 2 or 3 year old initiative by the alumni office. But it's really smart because what it's doing is bringing together RISD people who, again, are working in the same industry, are sharing the same kind of professional goals, and making it easier for them to share information, to connect about opportunities, to maybe even hire each other in certain circumstances. So it's a really great way, especially once you leave RISD, to kind of stay connected with RISD and stay in touch with your fellow students after you graduate, and connect with other alums. The other thing that they're doing more and more of all the time, and so I want you all to kind of be aware of this, is they're putting on kind of learning and events, most of the time webinars, especially because of the pandemic period that we're in right now, and also just to make it accessible. But you see these kinds of free webinars that students and alumni can attend. And what I have on the screen here is an example of a really cool one that's actually coming up. And it's RISD Women in Business, like a virtual meet and greet. So again, it's really just for people, for RISD women who own their own business or are working in kind of business related environments, to be able to connect, support each other, share information. Like that's an amazing thing. And if you know about these clubs and these organizations, you can access that. And I think it's especially an important tool to tap into even after you're graduated from RISD and you're kind of trying to stay connected to the RISD community. Another thing I just want to plug is this, and this is a newer thing too. RISD actually has like a new podcast. It's called Pulling on the Thread, and it's created and hosted by Lois Harada, who's an amazing person, an incredible alum of RISD. And it's basically Lois interviewing really exceptional, creative, impressive alumni about their career path, about their time at RISD, about the intersection of those two things, and just kind of other thoughts and perspectives. It's really cool. It's kind of awesome that RISD has its own podcast, and I love that it is kind of featuring these really cool stories. So may not be as perhaps useful in terms of networking as like the clubs or LinkedIn, but I think it's a really cool thing to be aware of, and who knows, like it might kind of spark your passion for a certain path or something to explore professionally. So it's definitely something that you can tap into. Moving into Instagram. And thanks for being patient as I take little water breaks here. I'm trying to move briskly because I know everybody's super busy, but I also need to take a minute here and there. So Instagram, like I said earlier, most people probably know what Instagram is. A lot of people probably have a presence on Instagram. So I know I'm not probably talking to an audience that has no concept of what Instagram is. I do think this is a cool stat though. So obviously it's a visually driven platform, right? It's all about sharing images, sharing video, which makes it perfect for artists and designers and visual creators of all types. So that's why I'm honing in. There's all kinds of social media platforms, but I'm honing in on Instagram because it in some ways it's kind of tailor-made for creative people and visually oriented people. But the stat that I think is wild is of any mobile application, so not just social media mobile applications, but period, any mobile application, it has the 4th most users. So it's, again, similar to LinkedIn, it's massive, right? The footprint is massive, and the access that it provides you when you go on there and use it is equally massive. It's potentially a great networking tool, a great promotional tool, a great way to get your work out there and also connect with other people. Art directors and curators really love it. So one of the things that I think is maybe surprising to people, maybe not, is how often people that hire designers, hire illustrators, hire video producers, hire artists, or show or exhibit artists, how often they are on Instagram and just kind of looking for new work, looking for new talent, looking for visual work that matches what they do, right? Or aligns with what they do. So it is a great way for them to kind of just passively keep a pulse on the creative world, find new and emerging creative talent that they might not have been familiar with. So again, back to this idea of people that are hiring or looking for talented artists and designers, A lot of them are on Instagram and using it for that purpose. One of the things I really like about social media and about Instagram in particular is this is a great way for people to find your work organically. So what I mean by that is you can have a website, you can have your online portfolio, and you should, but if you only have that, you're relying on people to just stumble upon your website, right? Or if it's linked on your resume, they can find it that way. Or if you share your website with people, they can find it that way. But there's no way for them to find your website like organically, right? Like nobody's going to just kind of like, or it's rare that somebody's just going to like be searching in Google and come across your website. Could happen, but it's not super likely. However, on Instagram, if you have a really good Instagram presence, you're sharing work on there. We'll talk about like some of the things you can do to try to enhance the way your work can be seen. But if you have a presence on Instagram, there's a much higher likelihood that people are going to encounter your work that way. And then you can use that as a feeder to your website. So you can have work on Instagram, but make sure your website or your portfolio is linked. And then that's a way to draw traffic or direct traffic to your website and get people to see your full portfolio. So that's what I mean when I say people can find your work organically. Like there's things you want to do to activate it for sure, but Instagram is great in that way of being almost a kind of passive way that people can encounter your work. The other really cool thing about Instagram, and I think people who use Instagram well do this well too, is that it can provide like a deeper view into your process. You can show, the kind of example that I like to think of is like, you can show people imagery or video of like what it's like in your studio as you're making, right? Like, or even things you find inspiration from. Like it can be a real personalized way to learn who you are and what inspires you and how you make as an artist and designer. Like, I think that social media has got its pros and cons, as we know, and there are some really good things about it and really bad things about it. But I think one of the really good things is that it can give people a really personalized and authentic look into who you are and what you want to share with them and allow them to kind of get to know you and your practice a little bit. Of course, how much you want to do that and how you want to do that is totally up to you. But I think it can be a really cool way to showcase those moments in ways that are different from a traditional portfolio. So here are my key tips or takeaways for Instagram. And again, maybe not an exhaustive list, and you might not do every single one of these things, but you might consider doing some. So similar to what we were saying about networking in general, like develop a personalized plan for posting to Instagram and how you want to kind of use this in a networking context. So a couple of things. One thing you want to do is make sure that you are proactive. So yes, that means posting stuff, but it also means following the right people, meaning people that are maybe going to be relevant to your professional pathway. So this depends. It's going to look different for every person. If you are a fine artist or a visual artist, that might be you follow galleries that you really align with or that you might want your work to be shown at. You might follow curators, you might follow museums, you might follow other artists. So again, like depends on your kind of goals. If you're a furniture designer, maybe you follow interior designers that collaborate or hire furniture designers to do custom projects. If you're an illustrator and you want to do editorial illustration, maybe you follow art directors that work at publications that feature editorial illustration work. You get the idea, right? So on and so forth. So that's what I mean when I say right people. Follow people that are connected to your industry and doing work that's tangential to what you're doing. You also, it's social media, right? So you want to engage and communicate and you want to be active. So again, that does mean posting, but it also means liking, commenting, and maybe even direct messaging with other people that are on Instagram, again, that are like creating the same kind of work you do, or that are working, like we were saying before, like the galleries, the art directors, etc. Like if you engage with their content, they're going to be much more likely to engage with yours, right? If you comment on, if they, let's take the gallery example, if they have a show opening and they post about it and you comment on it and you appreciate it, they're going to notice that. And that might prompt them to go click on your profile and see what you do as an artist. And then all of a sudden we might have the beginnings of a networking connection and a relationship that might, lead to a professional opportunity. So that's what I mean when I say like engage and communicate. Like make sure you are active on Instagram. Hashtagging is a good idea too. This gets to the idea of like how to get found organically, how to get found on Instagram. So with hashtagging, there's a lot that could be said about this probably, but I think keep in mind a couple things. So again, like do some research on Instagram and see artists that you admire or designers that you align with or companies that you connect with. Like how are they hashtagging? What hashtags are they using? What hashtags are common in your field? That's a good guide because then you can kind of see like, okay, I should probably be using these hashtags. The other thing you want to think about too is just finding a balance between using hashtags. So in other words, if you think of it as a spectrum, there's hashtags that like are very niche or very few people use. And so it's unlikely that people are going to search by those hashtags or that work that is tagged with that hashtag is going to be seen. So there's that end of the spectrum. Then there's this end of the spectrum, which is almost like the saturation point, like real like hashtag visual art. Like that's so general that there's millions of tagged posts with that hashtag. So your post might get lost in the shuffle there. So you want to try to find the happy medium of like hashtags that have good visibility, but that are not oversaturated. So just like that takes a little bit of digging and that takes a little bit of work to see what hashtags might fit for you, but do some digging and do some exploration on Instagram. And then last bit of information here is develop a posting schedule. So you don't have to post every day, maybe weekly if you want to be pretty active. I would say weekly is a good goal to shoot for, maybe multiple times a week if you can. And in addition to timing, also think about the content too. So this is where I was getting at with, not just showing finished work, but also showing process, maybe also showing inspiration. Maybe you can weave in some personal stuff in there too. It's okay to post things that are like, non-art related, things that are more personal. So you can vary the content, and I think that's a good idea. The example that I'm showing here, and I mentioned Marley earlier in the talk, Marley's a RISD alum and an illustrator who makes great use of Instagram. In fact, she did a talk for us a number of years ago, kind of talking about how she used Instagram as part of her career. But one of the things you see when you look at her profile is there is kind of a style and consistency, especially in terms of color across her work, but she also does mix it up. So she does illustrations, she'll show process, she'll do some personal posts that kind of are just like her kind of talking about her perspective on life and her feelings on her background and upbringing and things along those lines. But the other thing that Marley does really well, and you can kind of see it from this example, is she is also really engaged. So when she posts something and people comment, she responds to the comments. She interacts with people. And I think that's a big part of why Marley has been successful with Instagram. She posts really well. Her work is really cool and it's beautiful to look at, but she's also interactive and really kind of thinks about it in terms of a community and engaging with people. And I think that's a big reason why Marley's been successful. Okay, so I'm going to try to move through this stuff quickly because I'm looking at the time, and unfortunately I am a talker and I have done that. I have talked a lot. So I'm going to try to cruise through things here so I can, get you all out of here in a reasonable time. I do want to focus on professional associations a little bit though, because I think that this is a really underrated part of networking. So professional associations are essentially groups of people, organizations that have been created to support professionals who are working in a given field or industry. So there are thousands of professional associations out there across all spectrums, not just art and design, any field you can think of. But they're really, really amazing in the way they can help you find more creative studios and businesses that are doing work that you really align with and maybe want to get hired for. They can help connect you with jobs and opportunities or resources relevant to the career path you're exploring. And they can also, to the point of this talk, really provide a lot of leverage and help in growing your community and finding connections and building professional relationships. So I'm going to actually, the link here, and I'm sure Alan is going to share it if he hasn't already. If you're totally unfamiliar with professional associations or don't know where to start or how to find any, the link that just flashed on the screen and also the link in the chat takes you to a page on our website where we actually have a lot of information on professional associations, especially organized by major. So you can kind of think about what's my discipline, and then there's a section for each discipline, and it has links to common professional associations for that major. So that's a good way to get started. I'm going to highlight one in particular right now just to demonstrate the value. So Climate Designers is a really cool organization. It's relatively new too, that started to cultivate, support, and provide resources for designers who want to work on the problem of climate change and are really focused on sustainability. It's an awesome, awesome group. And frankly, it's one of the best organized and kind of most highly resourced professional associations I've come across. And I'm going to kind of like share with you some of those examples right now and do another little demo video. So this is the Climate Designers site. And right on the homepage, one of the things you can click on right away is profiles. And look at this, it's amazing. These are actual professional designers who are working on climate change, and I can search by different areas of design even. So I can do environmental, I can do experience design, visual, video, photo, etc. Like, it's amazing with one click the amount of information I can find about other designers who are doing work that aligns with, in this case, if I'm interested in climate change sustainability, I can find people who are doing that work. I can click on their profile like I'm doing here with Charlene. I can see examples of their work. I can like read about them and learn about them. And if I wanted to, I could click on their website or go to their LinkedIn, both as good ways to kind of establish that connection and introduce myself. So it's amazing, right? Like, how cool is this that this exists? Even more, I have the opportunity to go to their Connect tab, and they have these regional chapters. So kind of think back to what we were saying about how RISD has these alumni chapters. This is kind of Climate Designers' version of that, where they have these chapters of professionals in these different cities across the world who are doing work related to climate design. I can click on any one of these and learn more about it. This is really cool. You don't see all this all the time with professional associations, but they even have this introduction to climate design guide. And if I want to be a climate designer, what are things I should be doing, and what are the steps I should be taking, and what are the resources and tips for doing this kind of work? This is amazing. And these are the kinds of things that you can find in professional associations. And just because I want to give a shout out, this design guide was actually created by a RISD alum, and it's kind of noted here, Aidan Hudson-Lepore, who's an amazing person. And I can go and click on their website, and all of a sudden I'm connected now, potentially. I can reach out and get connected now to an amazing alum who is passionate about this work. I can learn more about them, see what they're working, where they're, where they're working, and kind of what their work entails. And again, it's relatively easy for me to, click on their LinkedIn. And if I have a LinkedIn profile and I'm all kind of up to date on what I need to do on LinkedIn, I'm maybe one connection away or one message away from building a relationship with that person and kind of adding them to my network. So again, that was a bit quick, but hopefully that's giving you a sense of how these professional associations can be incredibly valuable as networking tools, as knowledge tools. I didn't even show you this in that demo video, but Climate Designers also has a job board for opportunities that are specific to design and sustainability. Again, not every professional association has that, but it's fairly common that they do. So they're like these really incredibly valuable hubs of information that I think anybody and everybody should tap into and really utilize. So I want to, sorry, I keep getting thrown off by these videos. I also just want to reinforce the fact that these types of professional associations are across the spectrum. Like, you can pretty much find a professional association for almost any industry or any path. So, it can be areas like the One Club for Creativity or the National Organization of Minority Architects, which are organizations that are supporting diversity within the realm of art, design, and architecture in these two cases. American Craft Council for craft-oriented artists. Professional Organization for Women in the Arts, which is kind of supporting women who are working in the arts, maybe not as artists as much as sort of like curators, arts administrators, art educators. Amazing organization. American Institute of Architects for architectural professionals. AIGA is great for graphic artists, graphic designers and illustrators. The BIPOC Directors Collective for people who, BIPOC individuals who are interested in production and film and directing. Interaction Design for UI UX designers and interaction designers. The Third Eye Collective, which is a collective of South Asian people of South Asian heritage who are in the creative fields. Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. So if you're interested, if your illustrator is interested in children's book illustration or children's book writing, boom, there's a professional association for you. Queer Art for artists that identify as queer that are in the art realm in multiple ways. CFDA, the Council of Fashion Designers of America. Again, fashion, it kind of says what it is, but fashion design, apparel design. If you're at RISD, there's a professional association connected to the work that you do. It's a guarantee. It's just about finding it. And these are great things to tap into. So we're getting to the tail end here. And I want to address something that we haven't really talked about yet. So one of the things I started with was the value of networking. Then we got into these tools and resources that can help you find people to add to your network. But you might have questions around like, what do I actually say? What do these conversations look like? How do I engage in networking conversations? So using the tools that we've talked about, you can find people that you want to reach out to, but then there's sort of a question of like, how do I do this? Like if I send them a message on LinkedIn or I email them, what does that message even say? And so I want to offer some tips, some guidance for you on this. First of all, keep it short. So if you're reaching out to somebody, especially if you don't know them, and you're trying to establish a relationship with them, a professional relationship with them, you want to keep it short. You want to make it easy on them. Keep it to a paragraph or two at most, like really make it easy to read and digestible. In that message, you want to briefly introduce yourself and talk about how you found them. So it might be that you found them on LinkedIn. It might be a faculty member connected you. It might be you met them at a career center event a couple weeks ago and you're just reaching out to follow back up. Could be a lot of different reasons, but explain how you know about them or know of them. This is important. You want to make sure you're expressing your enthusiasm for what they do. So make sure they understand that part of the reason why you're reaching out is because you're excited by the work that they're doing or the company that they work for, and that you connect with it. You also want to, this is maybe an important takeaway here, you want to portray yourself as an advice seeker. So you want the core of this message to be, yes, like enthusiasm for connecting with this person, but also that you're seeking advice or seeking guidance or seeking to learn from them in some way. And last but not least, you want to try to, on top of making this short, you also want to limit your ask, at least in this first message, to one thing and keep it relatively minor. So in other words, you don't want to overwhelm them with this first message. You don't want to ask for 3 different things. So you don't want to say like, oh, can you give me a portfolio review? And oh, can we talk over Zoom? And like, oh, can you tell me about internships at your company? Like if you ask for too much in that initial outreach, it might turn them off, or they might be overwhelmed by it and you might not get the response that you want. So you want to keep it small. You can always build over time. So this is just it doesn't have to look exactly like this, but this is just a rough example of what it might look like if you found somebody and then you were writing an email to introduce yourself. So in this instance, in this fictional scenario, the person writing this is a RISD sculpture student. They're senior in sculpture and they found somebody on LinkedIn. So they say, hi, Lynn. I'm a senior at RISD studying sculpture. I came across your profile on LinkedIn, and it was so great to see that you're a RISD alumni working in the public arts sector for the city of Providence. Most of my personal work involves creative, interactive sculptural installations that engage the public and encourage a sense of community. So kind of like establishing a connection there in that paragraph between the work of this artist, this student, and this person's work, Lynn's work. Second paragraph, I'd love to connect with you. Perhaps we can chat briefly sometime about creative placemaking and the work that you do at Providence Arts, Culture, and Tourism. It's really inspiring to me to find an alum working in a field that I'm so excited about. I'd be so grateful to learn from you. So again, like we're making a pretty minimal ask there, right? It's just kind of saying like, hey, I want to learn from you and kind of value your advice. It'd be great to chat sometime, maybe over the phone or over Zoom, and just get to know you and kind of like talk about the intersections between what I'm interested in and the work that you do. That's it. That's basically the outreach. And that can be kind of the model for how you approach this type of thing. So the idea is that hopefully, fingers crossed, that kind of outreach, that kind of introduction maybe leads to a conversation, right? So it might lead to a Zoom conversation or a phone conversation. If we get out of this pandemic, maybe it'll get lead to an in-person meeting for coffee or something along those lines. But you want it to, ideally, if it can, evolve beyond an email and into something a little bit more personal and substantive. So tips for what that conversation can look like. So one thing you want to be ready for is just have like a brief, some people call it elevator pitch, just a brief summary that you're ready to share, describing you and your work. So just, helping that person who's on the other end to understand more about the work that you do and why you do it. So think about like, how would you describe your work in, less than 2 minutes, let's say, like giving somebody a really kind of clear understanding of who you are and why you do what you do without having to, drone on for a long period of time. This is important. You want to come ready with specific questions you have for them. So you're asking for that person to give some time to you. Ideally, you have some specific questions ready so that you can help guide the conversation, right? And remember back in the beginning, we kind of had those slides that were questions that designers might ask and questions that fine artists might ask. That's the idea. Those kinds of questions are the questions you want to come ready to ask. You also want to be prepared to show your work in case they want to see it, though you shouldn't necessarily expect that this turn into a portfolio review, right? So you want to be ready to talk about and show your work in case they're curious, but you don't necessarily want to like force it into the conversation. And then this is also important. You want to ask them if it would be okay for you to kind of follow up periodically over time to like maintain this connection and maintain this relationship, and update them with what you're up to, talk about new projects you're engaged in, ask their advice or opinion from time to time. And you also might ask them if they have suggestions for other people, either in their own organization or doing similar work in other organizations that you could connect with. And they might even be able to introduce you and connect you with those people. At the very least, they can maybe give you some names that you can reach out to. That's helpful because then it's a way for this one connection to expand and mushroom out to become other people that you can add to your network and learn from. So wrapping up, and thank you all for being super patient, and seems like most people stuck around for the majority here, and I really appreciate that because I know time is precious. So my parting advice: develop a plan. So think about networking, think about who you want to network with, what organizations or institutions you want to get better connected with, or artists you want to get better connected with, and start to not only like develop that list, but also start to research and explore who you might connect with at those organizations or institutions or studios. Find hubs. So this is kind of connected to the idea we were talking about along with professional associations. Think of those as hubs or groups where there's information sharing, there's a built-in network, there might even be a job board that provides opportunities related to the industry that you're interested in. Like if you find one or two of these really valuable hubs, they can be incredibly useful in your career development. Be fearless. So I think, like, again, part of my goal was hopefully that like by the end of this conversation, you feel a little bit more confident with networking and feel like you have some tools to be better at it. But at some point, just putting yourself out there and introducing yourself to people and trying to establish, professional relationships, you just gotta go for it, and I want to be real with all of you. If you reach out to people, I don't think you should expect a 100% return rate, like people can be busy. Sometimes you catch them at the wrong time. Sometimes your email gets like just lost in the pile. Like that does happen. It's not going to be that every single person you reach out to is going to develop and become this amazing like mentorship and great networking connection, but it could, and it does. And so I think like, don't think of it as like every single person I reach out to has got to turn into this amazing networking connection. Like be curious, be fearless, just go for it. And I think you'll find that even though not every situation comes out the way you want it to, you'll start to really see the value in your networking. You'll really start to kind of see how these connections can be valuable for you. And then the last thing I would say is just be you, right? So everything I've talked about tonight are tips and advice. And I think for you, part of what you want to think about after this event is how do you synthesize this and make it your own? So some of the stuff we talked about, you might tap into, some of it you might not. Your message might look a little bit different from the message that I had on the screen as far as that email. You might not say it exactly like that, or you might not use that exact language. Maybe you don't like Instagram. Maybe you're not a social media person, so you don't use Instagram. That's not the end of the world. So I think there's all kinds of ways you can personalize this. And at the end of the day, that is what you need to do. Like you need to network and build a relationship in an authentic way, in a way that you feel comfortable with. So, it's more about kind of the quality of relationships that you develop than it is the sheer volume or amount.